I wanted to hold this community meeting today to talk about a proposal before the City Council this Tuesday that we'll get into, and I also want to hear your issues and your concerns about a year ago, and that is the issue of a lot of RVs staying at the marina. And I know it was a concern for you, and I know that the council took an action actually before my time on the council. I'm pretty new to the council. I just got on. And so I'm about 6 months into this job. And so I know the council took an action before my time to say that the RVs could not stay here at the marina. And I think they were looking at the State Lands Commission rules about how the marina can be used. And now we have a situation where we have a lot of RVs that have shifted to West Berkeley. And that has created a situation in West Berkeley that you can imagine is of great concern to me as a council member. We've gotten a lot of concerns about the health and safety of people living indefinitely on the public right-of-way. Things like reports of dumping of human waste into the storm drains and block sightlines on streets. And so I'm very concerned about those issues. At the same time, I've also gone out to these people in RVs and tried to reach out to them and talk to them and find out about what their circumstances and situations are. And so what the City Council is trying to do is balance the reality that staying on the public right-of-way on public streets indefinitely is not a safe way to be living for anyone. And so we actually have voted to enforce an ordinance, or we passed an ordinance that says that nobody should be in an oversized vehicle overnight on the streets of Berkeley. But we have held off in enforcing this because we are concerned about people who may have children in the Berkeley schools, who previously lived in Berkeley, people who are working in Berkeley, for instance. And so we want to try to weigh, to the extent that we can as a city, because we do have limited resources, we have limited land, and so we are trying to create our goal is to create a safe RV parking site that would be operational temporarily, so that for those priority populations who would be invited to a particular site, they could work with a social worker to try to find permanent housing or a long-term place to park their RV. So there's really two pieces to this RV issue that the council has already passed. And now there's a question about where should this RV safe site be located, and that is really why we're meeting. Because we have gotten questions and requests from the community, people who are looking at His Lordship's lot being empty and vacant, and they're wondering whether that site can be used. And so the council is going to consider this, going to take this up on Tuesday night. And I'm very concerned because I have met with the folks at Skates on the Bay. I have met with the Cal Sailing Club. I've met with the Berkeley, I think it's the Berkeley Marine Center on this side. And we're meeting this morning because I do want to hear from you. I want to make sure that I'm fully aware of your concerns. Since we put this item before the council, I've also become aware of, the city's fiscal interest, to put it bluntly. I mean, every month that His Lordship's is vacant is revenue that is not going to our marina fund to take care of the critical infrastructure needs that we have here at the marina. So we have a lot of considerations to take into account. And so I just wanted to give you that background about what is happening. And I do want to hear from you. And I would just ask that, I know this is a really an issue that engenders strong opinions just because of the nature of the situation. Mm-hmm. So I would just ask that if you can, I just have two ground rules. One is try not to raise your voice, try not to yell, and then two is try not to, don't use just, I guess I'll just say, don't resort to name calling. Those are the only two things. Is there anything else, any other ground rules that you think we should add to them for this morning? Yeah.
Could whoever asks a question use the microphone so we can hear the question?
Yes, sure. So I want to open it up to you so you can ask questions of me. So you can share comments. This is going to be pretty open-ended, and I just ask again that we just stick to those two ground rules. And I do want to say, let me just say, because I didn't get into much detail about this concept of a safe RV site. And I can't speak for the whole council. I can only speak for myself. A safe RV site is something that other cities are trying as we all grapple with this challenge of housing that's not affordable and people sheltering in RVs and in vehicles. And so this model has been tried by other cities. East Palo Alto has created a safe RV site, and Oakland has created one, and San Francisco announced that they will be creating one. And in all of those cases, they have security all the time. Restrooms and hand washing stations are critical because of, just basic sanitation needs. And we also have to look at access to water and access to electricity just to make sure that people have the basics that they need to survive. And then in Berkeley's case, I am also advocating for some kind of social worker services. So it's not just a temporary site with no end goal in mind. I think it's important that we encourage people to find a safer place to be, because the reality is whatever site we pick, we're not going to be able to offer it permanently and indefinitely, right? I mean, even if we did find a site that we could use long term, my goal would be to see people rotating through so that, we're helping people and then maybe another person comes in. And I'll just close by saying on the safe RV site concept, the state actually, there's a state bill, AB 891, that I just recently learned about that is, if it passes, would require counties and cities that are large enough to create these safe parking sites. So that's another reason why I think Berkeley should just start, because this is a new issue that we're grappling with the affordable housing challenges. So there's the concept of the safe RV site, and you're welcome to comment on that and give me your input. But I kind of separate that concept from the location. I think that's more where I want to really hear from you, because this item puts forward for the city manager to look at all public city-owned land, and then the marina falls into that. And so that's why I want to make sure that I'm reaching out to you. None of the other sites that we've looked at are as large as the potential site at the marina. Some of the sites that I have looked at and that have been considered are city-owned sites, like there's a parking lot at Berkeley Way that could be used just for overnight parking. There is a courtyard that there's a possibility that we could create some spaces there for folks. There is a small area next to the Pathways Navigation Center that could just be a place for just a handful of people. I will also say that there are private lots with private property owners that are vacant, and we are even reaching out to those private property owners as well, because we want to try to look at every avenue we can.
How will this be funded?
So I will just say that any safe RV site, so the question was, how would we pay for a safe RV site? So I will say that, and again, I'm just speaking for myself, not for the whole council, and there would have to be some kind of vote, but this is something I think we should try temporarily as a pilot to see, does this work? Like, are we able to help people? I don't know the answer to that. So I would like to see us try it, and I think the way that we can do that is the state has provided funding. It's something called Homeless Emergency Aid Program dollars. These are one-time dollars that we are getting, we were supposed to get last fiscal year, and we're late in getting those funds, and we will get them again in the next fiscal year. Because those are one-time dollars and this is a one-time concept that we're trying, I think that's a great way to fund it. But the whole council will have to weigh in on that.
But could you just, I think specifically you asked how that money's gonna flow back to the marina, because it's a self-sustaining.
Yeah, so with the Marina Fund, things like
Or would
Skates
it?
on the Bay or Doubletree, that does generate revenue for the Marina Fund. This is actually a cost, and what I'm saying is we wouldn't take money from the Marina Fund to pay for such a cost if we looked at the marina as a site. Does that answer it?
But would any of those funds coming from the government to the city to help pay for this program come to the marina? Is that what you
I don't think so. I don't think it would work that way, but I don't want to say definitively because I am not an expert on, how our Marina Fund monies work. So, but I see what you're saying. So it's sort of like, would we pay something as like a leasing of that land? So that's so I would say I don't know the answer to that question.
It has to do again with location. And I wonder if the land that is next to the soccer fields named after the former mayor are property of the Berkeley city, and if they could be made available to a program like this. I think the benefit from it is that it will not present any problem for any neighbors because there are none. And it's, I'm sure there is electricity already there and that sort of thing. It could be used for creating a very simple parking for that sort of thing, for which I am in favor.
Okay. We will look at every site, and part of what this item does is direct the city manager to explore all the sites. I can't speak to, I'll have to check that one out, though. I have to say I haven't actually scoped that out. We always get, I will say, just the concept of being next to soccer fields, I know that you can imagine this is a really tough issue because wherever we look, there is some neighbor, right? There is somebody who is feeling anxious about having new neighbors and has questions about security and restrooms and pump out of variety. So, but we will. Our goal is to explore everything, so we can definitely do that. And let me try to get in the back. Okay, so why don't we go all the way in the back? The woman in the blue and gold vest, it looks like.
Well, 3 points. One,
Okay.
there is a charter, I believe is the right term, that the government set up all of these.
There is a charter that the government set
The
up.
government set up in 1938 for all of the yacht clubs. We have to consider that and the permutations of what's legal with that. Secondly, if the city of Berkeley's handling of the homeless encampment at the corner of Sunrise Market is an example of passing the buck, then you guys haven't handled it at all. It's a mess. Why are we to believe that you will handle this any better? Today I drove by there.
Do you mean the
corner.
parcels across from Seabreeze?
Yeah, you saw it, all of
Yes,
us saw it.
yeah. So well, let me talk about that.
No,
because-
I'm just saying,
no.
if that's an example of how you handle it, how can we expect you to handle this?
Really share the frustration and concern about just the debris littered on those parcels, and I've pardon.
Human waste as well.
And human waste, and it's, I will say, that's not a safe place for anybody to be living, and every time I come down to the marina, I actually make a point of just driving around the district to see the state of that area, because it's so disturbing, and I have witnessed an open flame, and I worry that it's just a tragedy waiting to happen, and so I have met with our Caltrans District 4 director, because these are Caltrans properties. I just want you all to know that I am personally working on it, very concerned about it, and the challenge we have, like with a lot of other things, is Caltrans is telling us that they don't have the resources to do the cleanup more frequently, so we need to look at other options, like the city taking it on. Of course, that means that we're not paying as good of attention to our city-owned parcels that need attention. Another concept that I'm looking at is the concept of having a West Berkeley Business Improvement District where some of our property owners can step up and help us address some of these critical issues. But I thank you for bringing that up, and that is an excellent point. Barbara?
A couple of things. The sea breeze, across from the sea breeze, if you looked at it when you were driving down here, you would have seen all the garbage bagged, waiting to be picked up. The problem is it's not being picked up. That's a big part of the problem. The other thing I want to bring up is every day that His Lordship's parking lot is not being used is money that we're talking about, how the marina is in this big financial hole. And this could be income. People are willing to pay to stay here in RVs. They're willing to pay a fee. We're willing to come up with money for anyone that can't pay a fee. And there's lots of state money out there and city money that could be used to pay a fee. There's also portable drain out stations that can come and deal with any waste issues from RVs. Every minute we don't use that parking lot, we are losing Berkeley money. And there are potentially no neighbors here. When the RVs were first down there before they got raided, that place was clean as could be and had families that were in schools. There were people that had 2 and 3 jobs in Berkeley trying to support themselves. And these are people who have lost everything and spent their last dimes getting a roof over their heads so their families, there are as many as 2 and 3 generations living in these RVs. And the people that are afraid of them are the people that haven't met them. Yes, there are people that make a mess. Yes, I have neighbors that live in houses that make a mess. I have the biggest recyclers in Alameda County living next door to me, and my front porch smells like a brewery. They raise the piles in their truck as big as like the Beverly Hillbillies to recycle stuff that takes money away from Berkeley. And nothing's done about that. I finally started donating my stuff because when I first moved in, I complained to all sorts of things, including the health department, and nothing happened. So there are resolutions to all of this. It's my time right now. There are resolutions to all of this that include money for the city, that include residents that contribute to the city, and to just like sit here in whatever way that we're going to and say, no, this isn't going to work, is not thinking outside a box. Also, unhoused people, the situation in Berkeley has been declared an emergency situation. Any rules that apply to Berkeley Marina right now don't apply if you look at the emergency situation crisis that has been declared. End of what I'm going to say for now. You can comment back at me all you wanted.
We would have to, and this is part of the item, we would have to communicate with the State Lands Commission. And remember, the marina is in a public trust. This is state land that Berkeley is holding in public trust, and so it has to be used for public trust uses. Having said that, there are temporary non-public trust uses that can be explored, and those are always for a temporary period of time. So I just wanted to state that part. Let's go to the gentleman in blue.
Claudio Brasca, I'm a member here at the Yacht Club. One observation first, which is to reinforce the message of the lady that was sitting right there, which is I would love for the council to consider the practicalities of managing a site like that. And quite frankly, the baseline of performance today in the many places that are blighted, let alone just crossing here at the bridge over the highway, does not bode well for what the council and the management of the city of Berkeley is capable of. But I want you to consider 2 things. First is you said that there is not that many residential people living here. And quite frankly, I know that's not the case because there's a big community right out there in front that is liveaboards. There is businesses that set up, and they're quite big businesses, I'm sure, for the city of Berkeley, hotels, restaurants, and so you should consider that. The other consideration is we just went through a very long debate about the use of parking in the marina. And one of the key considerations was that His Lordship parking lot was going to be the overflow for the ferry that leaves in the morning and comes at night. That parking lot is full today. Now, you don't charge anything. You may decide to do something different, by the way, the same way BART does, which you don't today. But that is something that is being used today, and I want you to consider the fact that it's not an empty lot. It's actually being used every day of the week, Monday through Friday. Thank you.
Okay,
With no
thank you.
revenue.
And I do want to clarify, I never meant to suggest that there are no neighbors here or fewer neighbors. I thought I had said that every site has neighbors.
It's on record.
Okay. Well, and part of why I just want to say for myself, I really recognize that there are a lot of neighbors here, and I'm trying to reach out to all of you, or as many of you as I can, because I do want to hear from you. And I appreciate your point about the lot being used during the day. Another kind of wrinkle to this whole thing about considering a safe RV site is that there's a question of having a site 24/7 or just overnight, and that's going to be true for any site that we look at. And so I just wanted to put that out there as well.
Bird, I'm the Commodore here at the Berkeley Yacht Club, and I want to voice my opposition to the idea as well. What Claudio mentioned is that historically, even just specifically talking about the RV situation, we've had RV encampments here before. They may not have been Berkeley sanctioned ones, but they have. And even you talked about the RVs in West Berkeley, and it has been an issue as far as litter and crime. And we've had, in the past, when we've had the RVs here in the marina, there have been issues with crime. People have had problems on boats. We've had people that have trespassing, all that kind of thing. So the fact of the matter is, in spite of what you might say about people who live in RVs are fine, and I'm sure that is generally, the history is that it has been a crime problem, and I do think it will probably continue to be so.
Here, how about, yes, you, sir.
One question, can we clarify which part of the marina is actually under consideration, because the marina is big? The second one is, I would like you to be much more precise in your language, because you talk about the temporary site for people temporary to stay there. It might be true that a specific RV is temporarily there for 3 months. The site is going to be permanent. So please call it a permanent RV site in the marina, which basically means you convert the marina into an RV camping site permanently, and it will have follow-on for the rest of the marina, which is already emptying out, and it's already in disrepair. And if you look actually how many empty slips you have, it's going to further decline the revenue of the marina. But independent of that, please be very precise. Where do you want to put it? And then let's be clear, this is a permanent site for people which might be temporary there, but the site is going to be there.
Okay, well, thank you for those comments. I think in terms of the location, the item itself doesn't specify, but I can just say that informally, people are looking at His Lordship's lot, and I will say that, I've said temporary, and I didn't get into those specifics, so let me do that now. So the item talks about a 3-month grace period permit. It also says with an option of renewal, and I think that would be if somebody is engaging with a social worker. But I will say that any site we choose, it has to be temporary, because there are future uses. Berkeley Way, that was one of the lots I mentioned when somebody asked about which sites are being considered. That's actually slated to become permanent housing for people who are formerly homeless. And as I mentioned, the State Lands Commission doesn't allow a permanent non-public trust use either. So it has to be temporary by its nature. And there is a question though of how long is temporary, and that's something that the council will have to weigh in on.
I'm one of the organizers and representatives with Berkeley Friends on Wheels, which is the name that those of us who were formerly parked at the HS Lordship's parking lot and are now on 8th and Harrison and Gilman in Berkeley gave to ourselves, right? I just had a Berkeley Police Department sergeant stop by and tell me personally about 4 nights ago that the Berkeley Police Department appreciates how quiet and clean our community keeps it around where we are. So any perception that people have of crime and RVs does not apply to those of us who are at the HS Lordship's parking lot or at 8th and Harrison, not those of us that are part of the community. Second off, I personally spoke with the mayor, who told me himself, face to face, that any use of the HS Lordships parking lot has nothing to do with the restaurant because the restaurant property is separate from the parking lot. Whoever it is that leases the restaurant does not get the parking spaces outside of it. That's not part of the deal, it's not part of the lease. And he said that anybody who actually starts to lease the restaurant, it's going to be 4 or 5 years before they're able to actually function in the restaurant because of the renovations, seismic and otherwise, that need to be done before it can legally be used as a business. So you're looking at 4 or 5 years if they found somebody to lease that restaurant right now before it's actually able to be used to bring in revenue for the city of Berkeley Marina. Okay, last point is the reason why all of the camps in town look as bad as they do is because there's only one pathways. If there was more than one 50-person maximum capacity shelter that was 24 hours a day in the city of Berkeley, you would see less encampments. And there's nothing that says you couldn't use the same criteria for who's admitted to the shelters that has been proposed and decided on by the city council in March for any possible RV permit program. You know, people who've been in Berkeley, had Berkeley address in the last 10 years, disabled, go to school in Berkeley or have a student that goes to school in Berkeley, living in the household, people who work in Berkeley. There's no reason why you can't have the same criteria for anybody who stays in any shelter in town. It's just Berkeley doesn't have the wherewithal and the political will. The money's out there, the money's been allocated, the money's not being spent. Why? Ask the city manager.
Most third world countries blush in terms of its condition. Past the pier that I used to fish at with my kids, that's closed, has been for years. I'm a builder in town, I'm building a major project at 6th and Harrison right now. And just last week I watched a woman take her gray water in broad daylight and dump it down the sewer. That's at broad daylight. What happens at night? You know, that's what I want to know. What will happen here? So the question that I have though, is weren't we due some data back on July 1st regarding this population and that's not being included, it's not been presented, nor is it being included in the analysis as City Council goes into this decision, which by the way is the last council meeting of the year in the summer when no one's really paying that much of attention. It just doesn't seem right to me, you know. And why is no RVs not an answer? Just a question.
So actually, Dan referred to something that I didn't give the full detail on when I was giving my overview, but it is important, so I just want to take a moment now to explain. So in order to identify, as I was describing, sort of these priority populations of folks that we are going to try to provide some temporary assistance and support to find permanent housing, we have a homeless services provider called Bay Area Community Services, or BACS. That's their acronym. They run our navigation center, which is Pathways on 2nd Street, and they are the organization that's going to do the short questionnaire, reaching out to the RV folks to identify, to ask these, this very short questionnaire to try to identify who the priority populations are. And just a clarifying point, that work is scheduled to begin July 1st, not to end July 1st. And that's really important work because I have anecdotally gone to people in RVs and have tried to talk to some folks, but some people aren't home or they're not answering. And so we need that data to know how many priority population RVs are we talking about, and then we will have to probably have some prioritization process to determine who can we offer a space to. I think, in some other communities, they have prioritized families with children. So that's something that we will have to think about.
Just a follow-up question. If that's the company that is getting the benefit of the outcome of that survey by theoretically getting more dollars to increase their business, why are they the ones doing the survey? Don't they have a sort of an incentive to come up with a certain result?
BACS actually is, I'll just disclose this, even though maybe I shouldn't, but BACS has said that they're not interested in running our safe RV parking site. They are willing to do the questionnaire. So, and city policy is that we would put out an RFP that would be open and available to anybody. So that's what we would do for identifying a service provider for that safe RV site. Ava.
In mind what the real numbers are. We have $106 million in unfunded repairs, And we are operating at $1 million plus annual operating deficit. So there are changes coming to the marina one way or another. One thing that has frustrated me in talking with both Parks and Waterfront Commission is the serious lack of imagination that the commission in particular has shown with regard to raising revenue. If you had simply increased, requested BCDC for an increase in lip ports to 15%, you could have brought in an additional $360,000 a year, which would have gone into repairs at this marina on an ongoing basis, and you wouldn't be sitting here with $106 million in unfunded repairs. When I talked to the vice chair of the Parks and Waterfront Commission, he informed me that it's not really $106 million in unfunded repairs at the marina because 30 million of that or 40 million of that is the pier. And I thought, wow, you've been on this commission for decades, and yet 70 million, 80 million, that's not chump change in unfunded repairs. At what point did it occur to you to bring in additional revenues? And one example of that might have been Sausalito runs a very successful arts festival every year that brings in an enormous amount of money and also brings people in so that we build the next generation. So changes that are taking place here have been going on for decades. And just from a historical perspective, I would like to say, since you said this is a new problem of this homeless population, my great-grandfather had a successful business running for several decades at the time when the Okies started arriving in truckloads to California. And it was remarkable the welcoming they got. Their camps were burned down because they were accused of bringing disease. And now these people account for a large portion of the California population, and somehow they've made themselves useful. But one of the ways that we accommodated them is that we reached out to the federal government, and this became a federal issue. Thank God we had an accommodating president. But I feel like instead of fighting amongst ourselves, we should be thinking bigger. And I would ask you to look at the Weed Patch Camp, which was set up by the WPA, which I believe has some record here at the Berkeley Yacht Club. My great-aunts worked with the WPA in San Francisco, but they didn't work on the Weed Patch Camp. But the Weed Patch Camp went to Okies, and it set up a camp for them. It set up sanitation. It set up showers. It set up a library. It set up a community center. And these drunken, rebellious Okies, who'd been through so much trauma, suddenly became good citizens. This is something we could think about instead of just hating on everyone. We could go forward, and we need to. And one thing I would suggest, too, as we're sitting on the Hayward Fault, we might be able to learn something from communities that are set up improvisationally, because it now appears that the long myth that we've had in California, that there will be no simultaneous earthquake that covers the entire state, has been only a myth. So the entire state could really be struck by earthquakes simultaneously, and we would need massive rebuilding, but we would also need shelter. So we are starting to establish some sort of process for an emergency. We have a mini emergency here. Soon we'll have a major emergency. Let's think bigger. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just use that to quickly note, I've done a lot of outreach to the marina folks this past week, and a theme I keep hearing is that we have a diamond in the rough that we really need to polish. We have underinvested in infrastructure for the past 2 decades. So I do want to note, some of you probably already know this, but I just feel I have to repeat it. We're going to use our Measure T1 dollars to finally repave the University Avenue bumpiness. So that is scheduled to happen next year. The city has entered into a memorandum of understanding with the Water Emergency Transit Authority, or also known as WEDA, to look at the possibility of bringing a high-capacity ferry to our marina so we could have a lot of visitors frequenting our restaurants and staying at the DoubleTree potentially. And with that would come investment in the infrastructure of our marina, if we were to proceed with that. You know, the pier is something that, you know, I hear these stories of people who were able to enjoy fishing at the pier or just walking down the pier, and it's really important to me that we can revitalize our marina and see it be the gem that it can really be. So I just wanted to know that, Ava, because you had raised those points. So I want to hear from somebody who hasn't had a chance, before I do.
I had my hand up.
Camera.
I had my hand up.
Oh, okay, Jessica.
Thank you. My name is Jessica Prado. I actually used to live here at the Berkeley Marina, His Lordships, and I'm also a journalist. So I actually have documented this struggle since we were evicted from the marina since May, actually since April. I have photography, I have video, I have audio interviews. I also have public records that we requested before, after we were evicted, which we just wanted to see what were the actual documented complaints, written complaints about us, about all the recreational vehicles. That public records request turned up 5,930 pages in just a year. And basically what they found out is that they had hired the security reports from the first security services to patrol the marina. In total, they had 220 reports that they did. And those 220 reports, there was never really an incident. The only incident that sometimes happened was on April 4, and it's quoted, Hannah Japan manager said that there was a break-in around 7:50 to 8 p.m. 2 males, African-American, driving a grade 4-door sedan. Does that describe an RV to you guys? Does that describe somebody that lives at the Berkeley Marina doing crime? So to be honest, as a journalist, I would like people to think about the facts, what's actually happening, not just come in here with your negative opinions or what you have seen on the streets, because seeing is one thing, actually knowing is another, okay? And what I want to say is that my neighbors are actually pretty respectful. Right now we're in West Berkeley, and we're being patrolled by three police departments. We are patrolled by the Albany Police Department, the Berkeley Police Department, and the UCPD. Okay, so they're constantly patrolling us, and we have not given them any issues. So I ask people to take the time to not just open up their hearts, but open up their minds and their ears to people that actually are out there asking for help.
Can I
Okay,
respond
thank you.
to that?
No.
Oh, actually, let's,
Because that is not
sir, you
true.
already had a chance to talk,
That
so.
is not true.
I understand, and remember, I was going to do a quick reminder on the ground rules. I know we have different perspectives and different views on things from sort of our different perspectives. So, but let's just try to be respectful of everyone. And again, no name calling, no yelling, and we'll get through this. So, oh yeah, no, you did not. Thank you, sir. Yes, you in this. Yes, standing, yellow.
Beautiful shirt.
Beige.
Thank you. So my name is George, and I am not from this district. I am a Berkeley homeowner in another district, so I appreciate the ability to come here and interact. I resonate with some of the concerns about safety. I have my disabled daughter and my partner in our house, and we have and about crime and about garbage. And noise, and conflict. We have a couple of RVs a block from us. I'm happy to say that we've had no problems. It's been very quiet. I think the experience with the encampments in the cities has been a poor one, and it has and the performance of the city has been poor. So I resonate with that. I think that the issue for me is there has been no management. There has been no effective management, and all there's been is self-management. And that self-management, in many cases, has worked fairly well, but there remain a lot of problems. But I believe that the attempt by the city to say we are going forward with an approach that is more sanctioning. That means sanctioning works two ways. There are expectations of the people who are allowed to utilize those areas, and I think that then there's the opportunity for civilians or citizens to hold the city to account. I just want to say very briefly, there was a meeting yesterday in San Francisco on this very topic. They're calling it Safe Parking Lot. And this is in today's paper. I recommend you read it. Both sides, several sides are reflected in this article. But I want to point out two quotes. One is a gentleman, a teacher who lives near the Balboa Park BART station, who says, because people are already living out of vehicles in the neighborhood. It would help the area to have a dedicated space for them where they can be connected to services. This is a resident with concerns, but he's saying, you know, the harm is already happening here, he said as he walked out of the meeting. I think this would help us move forward and reduce the harm. And then there was a police captain. Another illuminating quote, the police captain Jack Hart argued the site could help make the area safer because there would be increased police patrols in the area, not to mention the social services the council member mentioned. I think just two more points. The gentleman who asked in the end, why no RVs? Why are we not thinking of no RVs? I'm glad you brought that up. That's something, you know, is that really the issue that's behind what people are concerned about? It's not really where should they be, but should we just have none at all? And I think that's a long discussion. These are our families. These are our grandparents. It could be us tomorrow. And I think if you want to say, well, not my district, put it in somebody else's district, it's not that far from saying, not in my city, just send them somewhere else.
Yeah.
And in fact, do we want to be saying, send them home? Is that really where we want to go as a community? Send them home like Trump says. Finally, I just want to say that I think our council member here is being incredibly brave. And I really appreciate you bringing this. Because it would be very easy for you to say, I cannot take this political risk. You know, let it be somewhere else. But you're trying to craft a solution that really speaks to everybody's needs, a nearly impossible job. But thank you for making that attempt, and I think with the support of the council and understanding and open hearts and minds on our part, we'll get somewhere.
Thank you. So I wanted to go here to the woman in the flannel shirt or plaid.
As a mom who lives in the marina, safety has been a huge concern for my husband and I. And I know that there might not be a lot of registered complaints that happen with the RVs. It's just people who lived here, we noticed similarities, or like not similarities, but we've noticed things kind of change when the RVs moved in. I'm not opposed to the RVs coming here. I'm not opposed to giving people a safe place to live. But the city council and how this marina is run, it's not set up to handle all of the initiatives that everyone keeps throwing at this place. You've got the cops moving into LDOC and taking an entire parking lot. You've got HS Lordship's parking lot completely full already. And that is a good spot for that, but it is full. So how do you accommodate all of the ferry riders? We talked about bringing in a high-speed ferry. How do you accommodate more people coming in here? And how are you ever going to rent out HS Lordships as a restaurant? Because I mean, it's already almost impossible to get somebody go in there now. So there's so many things being thrown at the marina, and no one is sitting there thinking about how all of this affects everything. Everyone's got one initiative here, one initiative there, one initiative there. And everything doesn't work together. So you guys have to decide which initiatives are high priority.
One thing I want to add, again, many of you may already know this, we've also, in addition to looking at a possible ferry and fixing the University Avenue Road, we've entered into a contract to do a marina area specific plan with community input from you and others, because I think Ava noted, you know, the over $100 million deferred maintenance on infrastructure. We have to look long term. How are we going to dig out of that hole and again polish the marina? So that's another thing we are doing to look strategically at the whole marina. I would appreciate your comments. Yes, Ray Hoodie. Yes.
Hi. So that we have some input. Homelessness is a problem for every major city. It is true that we do have a space here, but I have to say that 7 times you listed in the 3 pages, safe place. Do you think this is a safe place? This is not a safe place. This is safer, since they took out all of the people living in cars and the RVs, but somebody had to die, and a lot of people got robbed. It's a lot safer now, but on the east side of the marina, there are 20 empty slips. Now that's money that's taken right out of our general fund. Now it's, you know, people can, you know, you walk on the dock and and a piece of wood comes up. People can live with that. Would it be great to have somebody use power washer once in a while to get the poop off the dock? We can live with that. But when you have to really gauge coming from your car to the marina door, whether there are people trying to go through the garbage still, and people are going, let me in the bathroom, you know, do you have money? Your 7 references to a safe location, this is not it. Maybe it would be, you know. So I think, you know, whatever we can do to help, but if we put all of our energy in this project, there is no project going to the future. You know, you bring in $7.2 million a year with this. That's a big business. But there are hotels that want to move in here. You should look at the future. Have a hotel. So in 5 years, a hotel that brings in a lot of people and has restaurants and brings in money. So that we, you know, the marina has been available since the 30s. It was in the 70s. It was pretty much completed. We had a boat here in the 80s, and you had to wait for spots. There weren't 20 slips on one dock. You know, we have to think about the future. We can think about the now, but we have to think about the future.
Motorhomes require bathrooms, shower facilities, a dump station, especially for it. To provide something for a temporary period of a year or so is a waste of money. Number one, even if it was partially successful, so you will accommodate maybe 20, 40 RVs, they will bring in 100 more who will try to come in as well. So you may be partially successful, but to spite yourself, because we need income. We're running on a deficit, and you're compromising the appeal of the area to possible hotels, restaurants, etc. If you feel so conscience-stricken that if you must do something, why not take the amount of money that we would be willing to put into this temporary project and join with other communities and simply give them the money to build a facility for a greater number off the site, so to leave this available for any other kind of imaginative ways of raising value of the appeal of the marina as a marina.
I'm sorry to jump in like this because I want to hear from as many people as possible. I must say that I actually think that long-term we do need a regional site. And I want to work with the county because there's a lot of unincorporated county land that would be great for a very expansive RV site with social worker support and restrooms and showers. And because I do think that the homelessness point in time count suggests to us that this problem isn't going away. We have people sheltering in cars and RVs, and other communities have created safe parking sites and have had some success in helping people find a job or find permanent housing. And so that can be a model, and I think long-term a regional site makes the most sense. And the reason why, I'm not gonna speak for the whole council, but you know, I think the reason why we're looking at doing something locally temporarily now is because West Berkeley is experiencing a lot of health and safety impacts, and if we want to say that overnight parking of RVs is not allowed, I think there is a feeling that we ought to provide some space for some people temporarily while we work on those regional efforts. And because you can imagine those take time, and you know, I mentioned that state bill about requiring state parking or safe parking, that doesn't even go into effect until 2022. And so I can't, you know, we can't leave this problem festering till 2022. So we do have to take action now, I think. And but I do agree with you. A regional site makes a lot of sense. The woman in the yellow jacket.
Currently live in Berkeley any longer. I live in West Oakland. and I go to church in Berkeley, and I've often worked in Berkeley. So I have been, to credential myself, like I've been organizing around affordable housing issues in the East Bay for about 10 years now. So continuing to talk with people in the city of Oakland and folks in Berkeley and Albany about, right now, particularly mental health issues, mental health community education.
Louder, please.
But I would say, for the purpose of comment this morning, I feel like I resonate really deeply with the woman who commented about needing to think bigger. I've been thinking that, a lot of us have been thinking that for a long time. Like, we need to find a way to, to basically galvanize a regional approach over time to gain the funding that's needed to pay for what needs to get paid for, to alleviate pressure. I also want to make a plea as I'm listening to people, because I don't want to pit people against each other. I don't believe in doing that. I think that's harmful. I think this is a difficult conversation, and it has been for quite some time. It's been years that we've seen the housing crisis coming, and now it's national, and we're in it. We're not seeing it coming, we're not coming out of it, we're in it, and it's painful for everybody, right? In my West Oakland neighborhood, I moved in, and there were hardly any encampments, none, really, like a couple of spotty, groups of folks here or there. And now we've got folks all over the place in RVs and in encampments, and I know some of them, but not nearly all of them, and they're people. So I appreciate that plea. I myself live in an SRO in West Oakland. When I moved into that building almost 10 years ago, it was still coming out of a lot of drug activity and a lot of prostitution. And it was not an easy place to live. I share a kitchen and bathrooms with folks. Because of my current income level, it is the only place that I can afford to stay in the Bay Area, and I'm grateful for that. It has not been an easy 10 years. I've had neighbors come off of meth. I've had neighbors come out of crack and heroin. I've had neighbors leave because they didn't want to stop having prostitutes into the building, into my kitchen. Some folks are just average Joes. We got a couple students. It's a mix. And I think I just want to enter a plea this morning to bear with one another in the difficulty of the challenges that we're facing, because I don't know that there's another way through. I know that I have been pressed many times. I have grown friends as a result of staying in it. I've been transformed in a lot of ways that I could not have been without being forced into staying in a relationship. And I'm grateful for that. So I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm just putting that out there and saying, consider the value of the challenge, like what's being offered to the community in the challenge. Because it's not cut and dry, and it's not black and white, and it's not easy, and it's not inexpensive. I know all of those things. That said, I just want to leave this with you. I don't know if you've spoken with a guy named Bill Gilchrist in Oakland or not. He's the director of planning and building. And I think that I just met with him last week. I think he's someone that could help think bigger. He has worked in Montgomery, Alabama, has done a ton of really quality work with community engagement. He also worked in New Orleans after Katrina. So I think he just has a good sensibility about a crisis this large.
Okay, so I just want to do a time check. It looks like it's around 10, and we do have this room for a little bit longer, and we still haven't heard from some folks. So, do you want to use the mic? Yes, yes.
Since everybody's concerned, we have a homeless problem in America. We all know what's going on.
Yeah, hold it close to you. Yes.
We all know what's going on nationally. And I wanted to just make one point to the council about thinking outside the box. There's a lot of options, and it doesn't always have to be the city's burden to deal with homeless. There are a lot of people in Berkeley that might be open to ideas if they knew these ideas existed. For instance, I read an article about people, this was in Southern California, that opened their driveways. And they said, I'm going to allow a tiny home to live here. I'm going to allow an RV to live here. And they paid a nominal $100 a month, something that helped offset the electricity that the home themselves was using, things like that. We could spread out the issue, the problem, because this is a national problem, and not just saddle it on the city itself, because I think that neighbors would even be willing and interested a little bit, but this is something that has to be brought to the city's attention, to the people's attention, the citizens' attention. Some won't want it, some will, but if it got organized and put itself in we're gonna have a new look in America in the future, because this is not a local Berkeley problem. That's what I want to say.
Thank you.
My name is Fran, and I live on my boat here at the Marina, and I'm a member of the Yacht Club. Now, this proposal takes into account that there will have to be some money put out to have an RV site. I'm wondering why this is, where is the money going to come from? Because not too long ago, we've had an issue here with parking. The city hired a consulting firm to study the parking situation, and then they paid for a lot of signage to put all over the place to tell people when and where they could or could not park. There was no money coming in from this at all. There's only money that went out. They did this whole thing to accommodate a private company running a ferry service for their employees. There's nothing coming in from that. Those people aren't paying one dime to park here. They should be paying to park here, and they're getting, well, if the company wants to give them free transportation to their job, that's their business, but we should be charging them to park here. It's a lot of people that have been, that have interest here don't have a place to park, not for as much of time as they'd like to have. Now, I don't understand why the city accommodates a private company to come in here and create all this big situation, and the people that are here get no say in it at all. The docks are in terrible condition. Someone is going to get hurt really badly and sue the city. I guess that might be the thing that changes something, because you can fall down, you can trip over great big huge differences in pavement heights. There are pieces of wood all over the place trying to cover up holes. None of it works. It's just a mess.
You can drown.
Well, thank you for your comments. I will say that, on the parking issues, that item came before council, and, again, I can't speak for the whole council. There were some people who didn't want to charge for parking. I think that the marina is in, we talked about the fiscal challenges that we have. We do need to explore all sources of income. And I will say that there are critical emergency repairs that are needed to the marina, like the ones you've noted, and we did put in funding. We are planning to spend a few $1 million to make those critical repairs, and so that will be happening. And I was very strongly in support of that, but we do need to do more, and we will have to do more over the long term.
Okay, more pressing issues, and having the people in the RVs is a very pressing issue, but handling it and where does the money come from to do it? I just don't understand how the city decides to spend the money they spend. Just don't.
So I will say, and I think I answered this question before, that in terms of how would we fund the safe RV site to provide the restrooms and security, my preference would be that we would use the one-time state dollars that we're getting to address homelessness. It's called Homelessness Emergency Aid Program dollars. But we'll have to see if the council approves this and wants to proceed with this, where they want to do it, and how they want to fund it. So those all have to be questions that we answer. In the back, in the black.
I came late, so I don't know what the discussion was, but I think a problem with the city is that when you foist something on the community, you know that there's lack of enforcement. I think that it's very little to have a parking lot for the RVs if it's well managed, and I think that there's no problem. I think you should call it a pilot program and then come back to the community and see what you've done. I frankly see that, I don't know whether this is correct or not, but there's a problem with economic issues, and so the people have a right to want to have things fixed here. And so I think that this is maybe the first of more meetings, because I know that you are new and you don't know the complexity of the situation here, I would guess, but you're a new council person, so we'll see. I was looking at a video last night where you have a lot of fear about people that you don't know about, and as president of the Canton Neighborhood Association, there was a document passed out that said neighborhood watch, people coming into the neighborhood, stealing, not dumping their feces in certain places. And so there's been a lot of fear. And I think we should all settle down. The yacht community has a right to give their wishes because they live here, and you have a responsibility to say that you will do things responsibly. I think we need to have RVs parked, but it's perfect. They have wheels, they can be monitored, this can be a pilot program. So I say let's do it.
Site the city was going to implement on the RVs coming here, if the people had insurance, if they were running, if they were sitting for 3 months, and the people moved into transitional housing, what was going to happen to the RV? Were they going to sit abandoned, or were they going to be towed away, or have you guys thought about that?
Yes, those are all really important questions that we will have to dive into in a lot of detail if the council approves this concept of the safe RV site. I will tell you that the questionnaire, I referred to, I don't know if you were here for the part I was explaining that a homeless services provider is going to do a short questionnaire where they're reaching out to folks in RVs, and part of that will be asking about valid registration.
Aiden Hill, they have pronouns, former candidate for Berkeley City Council, current homeless commissioner. So first I wanted to invite you to add an addition to representative for the Homeless Commission. The homeless issue in Berkeley is so great, and we need every single voice, including Lori Drosty's representative as well. And so please add someone to the Homeless Commission. I also wanted to say that the Homeless Commission right now is looking towards sanctions encampments. We want to teach people how to live together constructively. And if this RV site does go through, we want to be a tapping agency to help you in making this RV sanction site work and happen. We have to remember that registration is very difficult because there are undocumented people in our community. And if you're undocumented, having those resources is not so easy. So I hope Berkeley as a sanctuary city would really look towards providing resources for those who are undocumented to live in their RVs, to live in tiny houses, and to be able to navigate the streets safely. And so I just wanted to invite you to add someone to the Homeless Commission. And I really look forward to the work you're going to do.
Okay, thank you, and I'm working on that. Yes, you in the black. Are you Todd, or maybe you got your name wrong? I'm sorry.
I'm Steve.
Oh, you're Steve. Sorry.
So one, I'd like to highlight this woman's concerns. Number two, is I want to also make sure, and I know Councilman Davila is here, I want to make sure that this discussion is not surrounded or circumvented with the concept of sanctuary city. This has nothing to do with the sanctuary city issue, because the definition of sanctuary city is so different than what we're talking about here. So let's make sure Aiden and Councilwoman Davila is not focusing on those issues, because that is a critical definitional issue here. Secondly, I'd like to highlight this issue right here. I'm not necessarily opposed to RVs, but I'm really concerned about the safety associated with those. And it gets down to the registration. We have lots of out-of-state registrations of RVs that have much simplified and less critical licensing and registration of their vehicles out of state. And so with that particular issue, and if you look at the conditions of these RVs, you look at the 4 or 5 RV fires that we've had, and where they've spread within that little confine of where the RVs are, you need the appropriate amount of setbacks as an example. Obviously you need the sanitation and all that, and we're talking, and everybody's talking about that. But whatever encampment or situation or parking you have, it has to have the appropriate setbacks, sanitation, accessibility, meaning exiting, because if there's a major fire, people have to be able to exit. Secondly, these vehicles have to be in operating order, because 35% of the fires that occur in RVs occur in a stationary situation. And so if you look at what's in an RV, gasoline, propane, electrical fires, everything else, that's a major concern. If it's a local fire, we have the concerns of a homeowner or a business that may sue the city. Let's stay with that argument. Or secondly, if it becomes a more catastrophic situation, the hills have been identified as a tinderbox. And so that will be a wildfire that the city of Berkeley, once they sanction something like this and permit it, it is a liability not only for the city, but the individual council members themselves. So Councilmember Davila, you could lose your pension, because due to the sovereign immunity issues related to if you agree to something that's in direct violation of the current RV standards or parking overnight and all those things, Every one of you are at risk for a liability. I'm just gonna bring that up. Finally, what I also want to bring up is, using Ava as an example, she continually comes up here and talks about whatever the issues are in Sausalito, San Francisco, whatever. This is the same woman who has sued her own landlord for habitation issues. And I'm very concerned that in the same topic. Hey, well, she has sued the city of San Francisco, or her landlord in San Francisco for
Why are we
habitation issues.
continuing if it's not right to do that?
I'm sorry, I don't think I
No,
see
you
my
so
landlord.
stop.
Yeah, what does her business have to do with this?
Please,
We're not singling out individuals.
Okay, there's
right
also
now.
a problem with the online survey that the city of Berkeley has. So if you actually download that information, you'll see individuals with their names who have voted more than once, more than twice on those surveys to skew the data. So if you're going to try to screw or skew the data of this city just because you want something to go through, that is not a democratic process. So stop screwing
That
with the
sounds
survey.
like hearsay to me because.
No, I've got the data.
Barbara, please, let's let Steve finish and then we'll go to somebody else.
There are people with their names on there that have voted more than once. And so if you're going to go out there and you're going to look at this stuff, you have to do it in a democratic process. Sorry.
Rashi, may I just point out
So-
that
No,
what was said
no,
about me is not
no.
accurate.
Ava, it's okay, we will, let's all just disregard what was said, and please remember, we're almost done, we've done such a great job of being respectful and listening, and I hope that this has been insightful for people, it has been for me, and let's just try to wrap up in a positive way. There was a gentleman in the blue.
I'm a member of the yacht club, okay? If I want to come over and use the club, and if I want to bring a friend, and if we're taking the boat out and gone for a few days, the car is subject to being towed, really. So that's a strike against here. The people who use skates for parking are also concerned about the safety of their vehicles. We have a kids camp here in June. We're bringing kids over to the adventure park over here, and we were really concerned about the safety of the kids. Part of that is the homelessing. Oakland has a homeless situation out by the Home Depot. Right now, Oakland is looking at losing Home Depot and losing 300 jobs, which is simply going to increase the homeless population. So we've all got problems here, and the problems are rather individual. And so we have to, I think, address the whole thing on an individual basis here. We need a lot more stuff nationally. Okay, the gap between the rich and the poor grows daily. Trump's full employment puts people into jobs where they're now working 3 jobs and still can't afford to rent an apartment, much less buy a house. So we've got a situation here that calls for some national help. Our individual locations have to be addressed individually. Oakland is trying to do something for Home Depot. It may or may not work. Skates has some problems they're going to deal with their parking. We have problems here of the same sort. Okay, we pay rent, Skates pays rent, every one of these people in the marina pays rent. So the individuals have to be, their problems have to be addressed. A lot more than just big things here. Can you get an employee at Skates, say maybe he gets a chance to park his RV there because he works here? How do we deal with this thing individually? And I think that's what you have to be concerned with, is dealing with it on an individual basis. Otherwise, we're not going to accomplish anything.
Okay, thank you. So I've spoken and you haven't heard your comments reflected. Let's try to get to those folks. There's a gentleman in the back in the gray hoodie.
The future vision or looking at it big. But you know, I'm not against the RVs. I'm not necessarily against the you know, resolving the situation somehow. But I think this marina also should be considered as a destination point.
Yes.
And in that sense, they should also, when I talk to some other friends from outside, for example, they don't perceive this marina, this area, as a, first of all, you know, a destination point necessarily. And they don't look at it necessarily always in a positive way from a safety point of view from, you know, other, but if you look at some European models or even in the United States, you know, there's a lot of, using the marina as a destination, and by investing into those locations, by introducing small businesses that serve the community, not just in the marina, which it should, but also bringing people from outside, providing more restaurants, cafeterias along the waterline, maybe not everywhere in the marina, but certain areas. That brings revenue to the marina, that brings revenue to the city, and helps people actually that in itself, by activating the marina itself in a positive way, in a social way, it actually reduces crime and basically increases safety, because then you have a lot more people, creating social policing. But so I think you should look at the overall picture what I mean by that is the overall vision for this location. And still consider the RVs and the homeless issue. Of course, we should consider that, but that should not be necessarily the primary goal here. And it should be, in the long term, how do you want to start from this point and developing this location further? Like, how do you connect it? Because, for example, back to the city, like the University Avenue. How do you activate this area by making a better connections in a master plan way? Introduce small businesses here, which we don't have. We don't have enough restaurants, cafeterias, or other small businesses. Exactly, you can do those. And not just, there's a lot of friction about, for example, other events like the 4th of July event, or the other event that uses the marina's money, I hear. I'm not an expert on that part, but that needs to go balanced out. But that was my comment. Just see it as a bigger vision for the marina as a destination point than anything else first.
Temporary. I was wondering what the larger plan is regarding the rising waters here. I wonder how long it's going to be before the parking lot is underwater. I think, are we going to be here in another 20 years, in another 30 years? And what is the development plan with our rising sea?
Wow, we have long-term infrastructure investments that we need to make, and I'll just leave it at that. Because, climate change is very serious, and we do need to be having a forward-thinking, long-term approach to those challenges. Okay, so people who didn't speak yet, would you like to talk? You have a kind of a...
There's one right here. He's
Oh,
got his hand
okay.
up.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, we will get to you next. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm concerned about several things. One is that Berkeley already has a lot of density. We have 11,000 people per square mile. Oakland has 7,000. We've got 2,000 people homeless in Berkeley. And how many can we put in the parking lot over there? And what happens after the 3 months or 6 months? Where do they go? I have a niece who lives in Berkeley. She's lived here about 7 years. Her rent keeps going up and up. She has a family, 2 small children. And if they want to find something less than $3,000 a month, $4,000, this is very difficult. So in October, she's leaving. She's going to another state. I think this is very sad because they're very talented people and they could have a lot to offer. But they've got to leave. What's going to happen to people who live in this RV park afterwards? Where are they going to go? Are they going to be able to meet that 3,000, 4,000, maybe 5,000 maybe by then per month place to stay? What's going to happen? I don't understand the long term. And the other thing, I feel kind of sad because I think you're going to vote for the RV park.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Well, I'm here today to listen to your concerns, and I will say on the effort to help people to find permanent housing, it may not be in Berkeley. I mean, you're right, the rents are incredibly high here, and so that would be part of what would be discussed with folks, I think. And I have to call on you, sir. I'm sorry to keep you waiting.
So, John Love, I'm a resident here in the marina. I go on my boat with my wife. I just want to make sure that everybody here knows that the city council in this last budget took an action to recognize that they do need to invest general fund money into the marina. $3.46 million. So, I want that to be explicit. You know, that there's, this is a big shift. It's never happened before. So, you know, a recognition that the unpaid, the unattended to maintenance needs to be done. Now, a big part of the rationale for doing that was because the occupancy rate there, as many people have mentioned, has been going steadily down and continues to degrade. And, you know, so I just want you to make sure that you're investing $3.46 million in the hopes that the occupancy rate is going to go up. Are you shooting yourself in the foot by doing something somewhere else that's going to cause the occupancy rate to go down, which includes people, you know, coming to the restaurants? The rate, you know, the occupancy rate at the hotel is actually down as well. So be smart about how you're using this as you get to the point where you can create the bigger vision of how do we, you know, make this gem truly the gem that it can be.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to do, in consideration of time, we're going to do 2 more short comments from people who haven't spoken. There's a woman in this blue fleece, this light blue or purple. Do you want to go ahead?
I'm not going to be able to address all of the issues that have been raised, which I really appreciate from the individual point of view. We really, there is a compassion that we all need to share. I live in a houseboat. I pay what I consider to be a rising rent, and I am concerned about 2 specific things that you have not spoken to. One is the number of vehicles that you expect to be able to accommodate without stepping on the toes of already existing need, which has to do with parking. And 2, I haven't heard one mention of responsible sanitation, water. I haven't heard one mention of what the city expects to provide for the limited number of RV vehicles that you expect to vote for instance. And I really have a difference with some of my neighbors because I really appreciate the need, and I think we all do, the need of people who don't have even what we have, which is very tenuous. But I mean, I don't even want it to be clapped for, because I think we're all, the people who live here, are struggling too to make a really viable community, as you say, that is not being given support for the way it is now. So you're expecting us to hold even a larger community without really investing in our future and our being here. So I'm not saying one or the other, but I really want to hear very specific answers to these 2 questions.
So let me address that. So the number, you know, you're right. The item doesn't talk about a number. I will tell you that it's hard to give a number not knowing what site we are going to use and not having done that outreach to the priority populations. But let me tell you things that are very important to me. You know, there was a fire in an RV. It was in Councilmember Davala's district. So we have to look at safety and setbacks and making sure that we don't take on more than we can handle, and we have to promote security. So those are the things that I'm going to be looking at in terms of managing an appropriate number if we proceed. And I think whatever we do, if we proceed with a safe RV site, we have to have restrooms and hand washing stations and access to water, because the point is to, you know, the whole concept is that I'll speak for myself, that I don't think it is healthy or safe for people to be living for extended periods of time on public streets because they don't have the proper access to bathroom facilities. So if we are going to look at a safe site, you know, we ought to make it safe in all ways, and and promote the health and safety of the people who are there. You know, people sail in the South Basin, and all of that, whatever gets dumped into the storm drains does eventually end up in the bay. So safety to me means environmental health and safety. It also means your physical health and safety, and it means, and I say that for people who are in RVs and neighbors and everybody who uses our common public spaces. So so it is 10:30 now. I know that there are people who still have their hands up, and what I will tell you is to please email me if you want to send a message just to me, and even better, email the whole council. And the email address is council@cityofberkeley.info, and the whole council will see those. And if you want to just email me, my email's a little long, but I'll tell you it now. It's the letter R, and then it's KESARWANI, R Keserwani @cityofberkeley.info. We'll be on Tuesday, July 23rd. It will be at the BUSD boardroom that is at 1231 Addison Street. The meeting starts at 6, but there's usually a consent calendar that takes about an hour to get through with public comment. So you can kind of plan accordingly. You're welcome to come, and for those of you especially who didn't get a chance to share your comments today, you're welcome to come to the meeting and share your comments with the whole council. Thank you all for coming. This is like much bigger turnout than I ever expected. And I want to thank you all for following. For the most part, I think we followed those ground rules about being respectful and not yelling and not resorting to name calling, because I do know that this is a very sensitive issue. The marina is home for many folks. The RVs are home for folks. And we have to, I am doing my best to balance these very difficult challenges and the needs of different constituencies in our community. And I will continue to reach out, and these are long-term challenges that we face, and we have to solve them together as a community. So thank you again for coming. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and please do call me too if you want. My number is 510-981-7110. Thank you.